first proper design job, and I wasn't surrounded by other designers either. And I thought, and I had like my graphic design work on the side of airplanes that were flying into Asia. And the example I always give is be Superman rather than his alter ego Clark Kent. You know, sometimes celebrity and notoriety just create a personal brand without really much effort. I figured, why not give it a go?
Hello, Frank. It's super nice having you on the show. How's it going?
Very well. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Tell us a bit about yourself and how did you enter this world of design?
G'day everybody. So I'm Frank. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I run a branding business called G'day Frank. And G'day is another way of saying hello. So that's my way of a salutation for greeting. I got into branding many years back. I started working in television production after I finished university. I did a university degree in visual communication, which is also known as design and visual application of design in different ways of different mediums: photography, videography, graphic design. And then fell into TV production, creating identities for new TV shows. So think everything from logos to the kind of look of what the show could look like here in Australia. And then after about 7 years, I'd met my wife, we'd had a kid, and then I thought, I want to start my own business and made it a branding business. So everything from brand identities, so logos and colors and typography, to copywriting, doing messaging, and then also looking at brand strategy and some other bits and pieces of marketing. That's what I do. And so that's been going for the last 6 years. And here we are.
Super interesting. It's always interesting how people reach out where they are right now. I've always heard all these stories and they always have a personal touch, personal connect when it comes to at the actual core, starting off the design business journey.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different one in terms of my case. Like, I never thought I'd work in TV production and finishing university as a first proper design job. And I wasn't surrounded by other designers either. And I thought I'd probably work in like an ad agency or a marketing agency, just couldn't get a job at the time. And I happened to fall into this gig at a TV production studio. And they're like a really big global production house based in the UK and other places all around the world. They made shows like American Idol and MasterChef and Got Talent. So we made a version of Asia's Got Talent, and I had like my graphic design work on the side of airplanes that were flying into Asia. And
nice.
Just like some weird and wonderful stuff. And then just falling into thankfully, not falling into it was very planned, but thankfully it's lasted into this design business. And then made some kind of name for myself in this little community of designers around the world. And it's a funny thing that happens, but I think the way it has happened is actually trying to put myself out there. And I think that's what those that you do maybe look up to, other designers, you tend to look at those who do put themselves out there and do become known. So I figured, why not give it a go?
Right, makes sense. Your recall value as a personal brand is just exceptional. How would you advise other designers or brands to stand out at the core?
Look, you could do the very vanity thing and do it like I do and just use a color like it's just everywhere. Like I have pink fingernails and I have pink cups and glasses, obviously, backgrounds. I wear some pink clothing, and that's very not so much typical of a male, especially in Western cultures. I'm not too sure what it's like where you are, but it's not typically. Okay. I mean, you've got blue headphones. It's very typical. Right. Male is blue. But that's one way of standing out, at least to capture some attention is things like color. I guess also your appearance and your demeanor and your personality. I always say if you can come to the table with 110% of who you kind of are, so that extra 10% kind of. The example I always give is be Superman rather than his alter ego Clark Kent. So, be the person that's just that bit more engaging to have some interest in, and that might bring you out of your shell a little bit more, and you might feel like it's a little disingenuous, a little bit not genuine in terms of the type of person you are. But I think you'll find a lot more people will be attracted to a bigger personality sometimes,
Makes sense.
until you get to a point where you are comfortable in it potentially. But the other part to it is showing up. I think is showing up often and as much as possible in as many places as possible with something of substance. That's the kind of caveat, is something of substance to share with somebody, be it something that, educative, informative, educating, inspiring, something that shows what it is you do and people admire it. All these different factors you can do. But I think, if you constantly show up and that can, compound over time. Building a brand in general, be it a business, be it a personal brand, does take time. You might get lucky and it goes very quick, but it doesn't happen for the large majority of us. And so, you need to put in the hard yards and stay present and do it as long as possible, I guess.
You would agree that it's becoming superbly important to stand out right now, or at least showcase a personal brand, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think personal branding was really a thing, I don't know, 6 to 10 years ago. Nothing prominent, at least, because people weren't online really marketing themselves on social media. It was just, here's the work I'm doing, here's what I'm doing, and that's kind of it, just posting stuff. Rather now it's, I want to give some value here. I want to help people with coaching. I want to create a course, or, it goes beyond the product or the service. A lot of the time it's creating these other services and offers and things. So personal branding becomes like this way of bringing the barrier down of trust, I guess. So it's like a bit of an icebreaker that if you can associate with somebody else, if you can relate to them, maybe more, it's an easier sell to sell in whatever you are offering. Because I think if you are creating intentionally a personal brand and showing up with something that is very easily identifiable and recognizable, you're doing it for some kind of potentially a commercial gain, or at least some kind of gain from it in return to helping people. Otherwise, you just stay in your home, be quiet, and not try and get attention. So it's very intentional why you would have a personal brand. There's some motive, and that's okay. I think just as long as you are open and honest about it, it's just a case of realizing that this is what I am trying to aim for. So have some kind of goal behind it, so that way you aren't just like flailing and going, oh, I need to just show up. Like this guy on this podcast just said show up, and I'm doing that, but nothing's happening. You kind of need to have some intention behind it, I guess. So it is important. It is something that people, I think, very much are now more aware of, especially those that do scroll social media and those that do follow certain individuals. There's something about them, and they don't need to be branded looking people, but there's certain qualities, I think, that are quite attractive to people depending on either the industry you're in or what kind of niche that you fit in, or create if it's a new niche entirely. But it's very particular to the individual to say where it's more important for this person versus this person. Sometimes celebrity and notoriety just create a personal brand without really much effort, whereas other people have to kind of manufacture it and make it something, so just to stand out. But
as far as this goes, it totally makes sense. I would love to pick your brains on this. You yourself have agreed that one might not have all the answers, but having the courage to ask the hard questions, that's what matters. How has that thinking actually helped you when you are doing branding work for other clients?
You've always got to be inquisitive. You've always got to understand where somebody else wants to go. And I think, especially if you're in a service-based business, you're trying to help a customer succeed, and as a result, you succeed because of it. So that's like a nice duality to it. But you're not going to know what someone else wants to achieve unless you kind of ask them. So you say, why do you need branding? Why do you want to do this? What do you want to achieve? What's the metrics for success here? And so you've always got to be curious and understand, even if it's not just for, say, your client, it's for your client's customer. Like, what do they want to achieve? So it's like they're like the middleman in between, and you got to be very curious in understanding what you are doing. Again, I bring it back to that idea of that purpose. What's the intention behind it? Can we understand, what's going to work here? And if somebody else has the same intention, so the client's up against other competitors that have the same idea, which in most industries, people are competing for, market share, you got to kind of position them in a way that's going to be something different. So it's like, okay, well, do you think this could work? Do you feel like you'd be comfortable with positioning yourself against this competitor, like really go for the jugular, or would you rather be a bit more passive and run your own race and do that kind of thing? And I think you end up finding the right path. But again, it comes down to questions. Like I do a workshop with my clients just to, if it's a 20 questions kind of thing, or if it's a little bit more in depth over a few more hours, just to get everything they have down in their head down on paper. And that might be, there might be a few questions in there that they've not really had the time to think about. And that might be of value to somebody. And I think, if you're not asking questions, if you're just assuming everything, I always got told this saying, assuming things makes an ass out of you and me. And like you break down the word there, and it's just like a fun little saying there, but it kind of rings true that if you assume you're going in very ignorant or arrogant, thinking that you know all the things, and that might not serve you very well. It might, the age-old saying is, Henry Ford said, if I listen to my customers, they just want faster horses. They wouldn't have thought of a car. So sometimes you've got to be a little bit more innovative to think what your customers will need. But there's other times where it's not a bad thing. If in fact, it's actually quite a good thing to ask, what somebody does need. So yeah, I'd say it's very worth it.
Right. Coming up with answers is, you can say, more so solution oriented instead of actually being problem oriented. And when you're trying to find answers to bigger problems, you would have to be problem oriented first. Even with this example, I've always heard this example so many times about Henry Ford.
Yeah.
Like, there are people who have kind of actually, taken that too seriously and breaking it down that you can't have faster horses after a limit. So even if a person tries to innovate, you'll have to innovate some sort of machinery, because you can't push nature's limits. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's how the iPhone, I think, was developed. Everyone at the time still had the touchpad, phones, and then along comes Apple with the touchscreen. Like touchscreens weren't anything really all that new, but in terms of the application of it, that somewhat innovative in terms of how the phone changed, and that obviously sets off a trend and revolutionized. Same thing with AR and VR and that kind of stuff that will come much more, prominent over in the future. But there's like this limit, and then what comes that sort of deviates. But I think to your question before, the point you were making in terms of the answer, like some people will be quick to go, okay, here's the question, then here's the answer, then just roll with it. Sometimes it's like, okay, well, if I ask the question and then I get an answer, can I question the answer? And that's probably sometimes the thing that might not be thought through even more. Is like, okay, well, if we think this is the answer, is that true? Can we test it? Can we validate it? Is there more than one answer? And this is where, if you had multiple people that you could target for a business or a brand, or for your own, clients, who could I target? I don't have to be so niche that I only focus on real estate agents that sell and buy properties. I could focus on many different industries and have a different kind of answer for each of those segments. So, there's something in that. And that's very much strategic thinking rather than, design kind of oriented thinking, because that's where you get into the technical side of things. Once you have your answer, yes, then you go and do the things, and then hopefully reassess. You have to see if it's working, and then come back to the table and go, okay, well, if it's working, great. If not, we adjust. But yeah, question the answer sometimes is like the hidden little piece that some people might look over.
Right. Makes sense. You were talking about niching. We'll come to that. And before that, about brand strategy. What part of the brand strategy process, the entire branding process, is your personal favorite?
Probably positioning. I mean, because that's where it really comes down to. The strategy is picking who you want to engage with, and then saying, okay, well, this is why I want you to think of me. This is why I want you to pick me over somebody else. And you can do many different kinds of positioning. Like, you could be the luxury kind of brand, you could be the more affordable brand, you could be whatever. And it's really does depend sometimes on your competitors, or you can go up against, I was just watching TV before coming on the podcast, and there's an ad for a hardware store that sell tools and wood and all the rest of it for builders and renovations. And they're the number 2 brand. We have a very big brand that is the most dominant hardware store, but they call themselves the other hardware store, this number 2 brand. And it's very similar to Avis, the car rental company. We try harder because we're number 2. That's their kind of main slogan. So you can position in some interesting ways. You can position simply just to be remembered. Like for me, the way I'd position myself, let's say, is the Aussie branding guy with a beard that wears and uses pink like he's some kind of bowerbird. Instead of blue, he's always collecting pink and using pink and just showing up with pink. Like that to me is just, if I can be remembered maybe for that, then that's all I'd really need to make it as simple as possible. And that's hard to do. It's hard to bake something in somebody's memory to remember them by, especially when needed. And there's a lot of different factors in that and how you achieve that. I won't go into the weeds of it, but positioning, I think, is one of the more challenging things, but it can also be the very simplest thing. If you keep it, the simpler you keep it, that's the point, the easier it can become to use and make sure it's effective, let's say. And then from there, you get the trickle down effect of doing all the fun things. You can do all the websites and your social media content and your events and how you dress and your logo and your business card and all the rest of it. But a lot of people do gloss over that particular part of strategy, and even I won't go into the diatribe of it, but how some people see strategy is your purpose or your mission or your values or your personality. Some would describe that as your strategy, your brand strategy. To me, it's a little bit far removed. I call that stuff purpose, values, the identity of a brand, how you show up inherently, that kind of thing, versus let's get strategic. Let's understand what we want to achieve. This is who we want to help. This is how we're going to win by helping those people, and this is how we want to be remembered, and then crescendos into this is how we're going to do it to make sure that happens. That seems the most logical point to me. But yeah, positioning is the fun part. It's making sure that you've heard, you've listened, you've understood, you've tested it maybe, because you can always keep coming back to your strategy. It's not set and forget. You can always come back to it and validate to see if it's working, and hopefully growth happens as a result of it, because it is just a hypothesis. Like strategy is very much a hypothesis. It's nothing set in stone. That's just why you need to kind of revisit it. But yeah, I found it challenging, but a little bit more interesting, I got to say, than doing design stuff. So yeah, that to me is the part that I like best.
Similar thoughts. And getting the positioning part actually makes the other things after that pretty easy. If not easy, at least it gives a proper direction in which you can pursue things. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Direction is the word, definitely. Yeah.
Moving to the client side of things, you work with really big logo brands. I've always had this fascination of knowing, like, how do one get those clients? Just simply put.
Look, if you were to look at my website now, there's a lot of big brands that I have worked with in my career. They're not my direct clients now in terms of who I do work with at the moment. Like I've done stuff with McDonald's, or if it was with Disney and Star Wars, or Meta. Well, they weren't Meta then; they were Facebook still then. But those guys, or Volkswagen, or some of the big airlines, like that was when I was working in TV land, and that was just the opportunity because it was TV and brand partnerships. But since then, I'm still working with national real estate agents that are known around Australia here. So that's somewhat notable. And I have worked with a couple of the TV networks here in Australia since starting this business. And then I do work with a national brand of coconut products, so coconut water and milks and oils, which are fairly well known and highly bought here in Australia, which is nice. But what it comes down to is networking. I think to me, nothing else other than that has worked for me. by showing up, by maintaining relationships with people, and then them telling somebody else about me. So let's say take the
So
coconut.
word of mouth in a way.
Say again.
Word of mouth, would you say, has worked the best?
Yeah, word of mouth. Yeah, word of mouth referrals, that kind of thing. Like the coconut brand, I used to work with a guy in that TV production company, and then his father is a general manager for this business, and he put me in touch with his father, and then we've been working together for 2 years now on their brand, and it's just that kind of happenstance of being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's who you kind of know. But sometimes, you don't start these networks unless you do show up. So I've made content online and had someone send me direct messages on Instagram or LinkedIn and said, hey, I've been following you for a bit now. I like what you do. Now's the time. Would you be interested in helping us? And that's happened, which is very nice. It's very few and far between, I got to say, in terms of that lead generation. But when it does, I tend to kind of try and hold on to them as long as possible until the most I can help them, and that does it sometimes gets to a plateau and we don't keep working together. But over time, if you keep it amicable, I think sometimes relationships aren't going to work. That's fine. I'm not saying every relationship I've had is with clients has worked, but the ones that I've found quite valuable over time have been quite fruitful, which is nice. But I think if you aren't showing up, if you aren't present, people aren't going to think of you. Even if you do have this network of people, if you're not, say that you're not present within their peripheral at least, or just trying to stay top of mind, then you're forgotten. And that's the same with any brand. There's this idea called mental availability, to try and stay top of mind so that when someone does need you in a buying situation, they do think of you. Hopefully you're the first thought. And that's challenging, obviously, but that's what I'm trying to do, like just to try and stay as present as possible. And it's worked so far. Like 6 years down, it's still working, which is great.
That's amazing. Yeah. I remember, at this time when I was starting out, I'm still fairly young, so I didn't know it at that time. Wouldn't say I didn't know it. I didn't resonate with it much. And so I would kind of go down the old DM route. And I remember reaching out to the founder of an influencer marketing startup. And he was like, no, I don't want anything. It's fine. And I still kind of was pitching. And he was like, no, it's fine. And now we're good friends.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I mean, if you're persistent, I mean, good on you for staying persistent, because I'm forever and a day contacted by copywriters or appointment setters or whatever it is. And I just don't need that service. Like, I just flat out don't need it. And I get that many of them that I know there is somebody that is teaching these people to cold outreach. And you get all these weird cold outreaches that you're just like, I know you're trying to get my attention. I know the playbook. I get it. I just don't need it. And 90 people later, I'm a bit over it, kind of thing, like with the same people saying the same thing. So if you can, stay persistent at the start, I admire you in that respect, that you have that tenacity to do it. But at the end of the day, I'd rather somebody come to me rather than me outreach to them, because the thing that I've found, especially learning more about marketing and the advertising world in addition to branding, is that statistically I think it's like 95 to 97% of people aren't in need of what it is you offer. And obviously you need to try and find that 3%, but it might be a case that, that 3% just doesn't quite trust you because you slid into their DMs rather than you finding them. Sorry, them finding you. And that's a hard pill to swallow. I very much appreciate that. I always go, if work's slow, do I just start emailing people? Like, that feels really awkward. It just really demoralizes you, especially when you get no's or you don't get any replies, and it's like, oh, I hate this. Like, it's really hard. It is very hard. So I consider myself very lucky, and it's not lost on me that there are a lot of people struggling to try and find clients. But yeah, look, if you do good work, you put it out there, you put yourself out there. I'm a firm believer in that. There is proof in the pudding that it can work. It's just, it can be a lot of work, and not shying away from that, thinking, oh, it'll just happen. I'll put my work on Behance or Pinterest or LinkedIn and Instagram and just someone will find me. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. Like you got to do way more than that sometimes. So yeah, but no, I hear you on the DM.
Yeah. In the long term, your idea makes much more sense, which is being around the right people. That's much more sustainable, I would say.
And it happens over time. Like this doesn't happen overnight. It really does happen over time, and you start building some momentum, and you just got to keep making the momentum kind of happen, and keep sharing your stuff, and keep sharing you, and keep reaching out to people, I guess, and then to get to the point where people come flooding in. Like I know several people that just flooded with work. Like they got a very good following, they got a very good presence, very good at what they do, obviously. And they get flooded, and you're like, geez, that'd be it. And they say, oh, I'm just so busy, I just can't do anything else. It's like, well, that's a really nice problem to have. Right. So, it's a good problem to have. But there's the two sides of it. And I know, it's hard when you're in the famine mode versus, when you're in the fruitful mode. But yeah, I think you just got to keep on keeping at it.
Anytime I'm reaching out to a design founder and they tell me that they're busy with work, I'm like, nice. That's a good problem to have. We'll talk later.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I remember watching your presentation at the Brand Builder Summit, and it was just so memorable and helpful. Tell us about that experience and what generally inspires you to kind of share your learnings, basically, and the workshop as well.
I'll touch on the last part of your question about why I'd like to share this with others is because, when I started out, I mean, yes, I did a formal education. I was fortunate enough to go to university, pay thousands and thousands of dollars, which I probably wouldn't need to do today because most of it's online. But, to have that understanding, to be blessed with a job that allowed me to work on my skills and get to a point where I could run my own business and have that confidence, is great. But what I want to do is make sure that others, learn this stuff. They get that leg up. If there's like one thing I could give somebody that's going to help them, and put myself in the shoes of what I was when I started out, like I'd want to share what it is I would have wanted to know when I started out. And I'm a little bit different. My approach is very different to a lot of people. I'm fully aware of that. So it might not resonate with everybody, but there's something in there that I'm sure there's going to be at least one person that might take something away from it. So there's that. And I'm loath to charge somebody for that, because I know designers have no money. Like that's just a fact that designers aren't really interested in investing in themselves. That's okay. We're much more introverted. We're pretty slim in terms of the finances and things like that, managing our money. I get it. We're not that great at it. But if I can give something away for free, which is why I do a podcast, which is why I make content sometimes for designers, it's just to give back in a way that if I'm doing well, then if I give back, then that's some good juju, some good, something, bit of karma, I guess, hopefully comes back as a result. Whereas I see, a lot of designers making a living off other designers, teaching courses, and like, that's fine. They do what they do, and that's fine. But I just don't know if I could really lean into that avenue. So I try and keep it free. And a lot of people say, why are you doing this for free? And it's like, why not? Everyone's charging for it. Why not? Hopefully, over time, it's kind of like Gary Vee says, give and give and give and give. And I think the other guy that's part of the school, the really beefy, muscly dude that's always got a bandage over his nose, he's always trying to give it. That's the one, Hamosi. Yeah, always trying to give as much value as he possibly can. He's not there to sell you anything. He's just there to give, and he's got his other avenues of wealth. Similar kind of thing. I'm getting my clients, that kind of thing, and then giving. Not to say I'm taking a leaf out of his playbook or anything like that. I don't quite relate to him all that much, but in terms of doing that, that's why. But so that's that part of the question. The other part, I've known Jacob that ran the Brand Builder Summit for some years now. We've had dinner together. We've met up at a few different events. He's a lovely guy. Obviously, he does use pink. He does branding, and he's like the what is it? The multiverse, different version of me, maybe, but still in the same universe. So yeah, he's a lovely guy, but he invited me kind of last minute. He thought he might have had a speaker that was going to pull out, but and said, just, in case, mate, would you like to do this? And I said, yeah, it's a bit last minute, but I think we can pull together something. And I knew what summits are like. I knew what these online kind of events are like. I've been a part of them before. I've been a speaker at I think one or two before. And most people show up with presentation slide deck, and they might show up in full screen, or they might just show up, in a little circle or a square at the top right-hand corner of their screen, or bottom right, or wherever it is. And I thought, if everyone's going to do that, most likely they're not going to do this other idea I have, that I can get in front of a green screen and stand full body in my presentation and feel a little bit more immersive. Unique, yeah, exactly. And that was the point. That's the whole thing. And I made a YouTube vlog about this just over the weekend, about, standing out. If everybody's zigging, I'm going to zag. And can't remember the guy that coined that phrase, but
Martin
I just did it. But no, it's not Marty Newmeyer. No, it's another bloke. I think it's John Hegarty. Sorry, his name is John Hegarty. He's an advertising bloke. So it was a bit before Marty Newmeyer. But anyway, if everyone's zigging, you got to kind of zag. You got to stand out. And I thought, if I'm going to come to the table with a presentation and a talk that is of no extra value than everyone else's, like everyone else is valuable in their own right. I'm not arrogant enough to think that mine's going to be a better talk than theirs. It's just how we can be distinct, how we can stand out and really walk the walk, I guess, of branding, without saying this is how you do branding. This is an example that might stand out. So I was like, okay, I think I can do this. I've got so much gear. I've got green screen, I've got lights, I've got cameras, I've got teleprompters. Let's give this a shot. And it's a nice case study. I think I got a lot of good feedback, and just like you've said, it does stand out. So it was nice to hear that as a result. The talk was nice. Everyone said, yeah, the talk was great, but I think the standout thing was obviously the way I presented it, which my dad always said to me, presentation is sometimes 9/10 of the battle. Sometimes you just need to get people drawn in first to be able to hold their attention. So, that's job done kind of thing. Tick.
Yeah, job done. That's for sure. It was great.
Yeah.
Finally, a quick opinion from you. Would you advise right now for a young guy or girl to go towards formal education for design, or would you advise them to go solo self-learning route?
I would say do what's most comfortable for you and what means you have. So if you don't have the means to do formal education, that's fine. There are ways of understanding this stuff and applying it, learning it, or learning it and applying it, should I say. Either via things like YouTube, via Skillshare. There's a lot of courses on Domestika. There's lots of books. And again, that if you combined all those things, and there's some courses out there from other skilled professionals in design, especially, that aren't all that expensive, and they all collectively together, that would be way cheaper than doing a formal education. And you might even find that formal education might not cover all the bases of things that you want to do, like my visual communications course. Like that was 15 years ago. Yeah, 15 years ago now. Maybe a bit more. That there was no real part of that education that related to branding. So there was no logo design and all that kind of stuff. I mean, but there was a little bit in there, but it was never like a formal class. This is branding, or this is strategy, or anything like that. It was, photography or illustration, or, print design, that kind of stuff. It was still pre kind of social media it was in the middle of social media, but there wasn't really branding, let's say. Probably is now, and there might be courses out there that do have it. But yeah, if you didn't have the means, then I would say see what you can find out there, and keep learning, keep even looking beyond design and graphic design, because it's a bit of an echo chamber. I think you'll get to a point where you understand how to use the tools and make something. It's just a case of understanding how you can interpret a problem and create a solution, and looking. I've always found looking at what others have done, there's like success leaves clues, I think is the term Tony Robbins gave years back. And that, at least for me, I've always learned by what others kind of do and interpret in my own way. And that might be how you are able to do it yourself if you're listening or watching this. But I think, that if you can't afford formal education, you don't think it's going to be worth it to you, or you don't think you can afford it, then there's so much resources out there now, which is great. Like let's put it this way: if my son wanted to do what it is I do, obviously I'd train him, but if he didn't want a bar of me, he wanted to do what I do, but he just didn't want to listen to me, I'd say don't worry about university. I'd say here's all the resources, go and figure it out, kind of thing. And I'm sure he'd figure it out. But I think the last part of that advice is some people have a knack for this stuff. Some people have an eye for it, or the kind of thinking and the creative sort of process that comes naturally. Whereas some might find it a lot more, it has to be not forced, but, drilled into them in a way that works for them.
The learning curve for them is steeper,
is a little bit different, which is, it's not a sad thing. It's not a detriment to you, I don't think, because it can be learned, this stuff. There's parts to design which are very technical, which is helpful. But some people just have this innate eye for it. And I'm not the best designer by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I see those other people go, far out, that's nice. That's really nice. And I'm sure half of them were never formally trained either. So, there's a case for both.
Right. Makes total sense. Terrific. Thanks for giving up the time, Frank. This was superbly awesome. I really wanted to talk to you. So this was amazing. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.